In our global chat app, we have completed the sign up process and now we can work on login functionality. But before that, I want to refactor my code so that further development becomes easier. So there is a screen folder over here, and inside of this screen we have this sign up screen. Now in this file, which is inside of this screen, I want to only keep UI part here like widgets, build method and such. I don't want to have any functionalities like connection to API, account creation logic and such in this file. So file inside of this screen folder is only responsible for rendering the UI. So for the logic part which is related to this file, say this create account function, we'll be keeping it separately by creating a new folder called controllers. And we'll be creating that inside of this lib folder with the name controllers, alright? So inside of this controller folder, we'll be keeping only the logic part related to a certain screen. Now let's create a new file here and name this to sign up controller so that it's easier to understand that this file belongs to sign up screen. Now let's create a class over here with the name sign up controller. And now let's move this function from sign up screen to sign up controller. And now let's import all the necessary packages and files like Firebase auth, material dart and dashboard screen. So here you can see that we need few variables like context, email and password text, and we generally get these variables by creating a constructor and then passing them in the class. But instead of creating constructor, we can declare this function to be of static type, and now we can directly call this function from any file and pass data directly into the function without having to create constructors. So now we need this email and password string, so let's create some parameters over here. So string email, and this email is a required string, so keep the keyword required over here. And now we can remove this dot text because this is no longer a controller but a string, and we need this for this password as well. So let's rename this to password and let's wrap the words. And now let's create a new parameter over here, required string password. Alright, and now we'll be sending this email and password string whenever we call this function. And the next thing we need is the build context, so required build context. Alright, so everything is imported and passed, so we no longer have any issues in this file. So let's move into this sign up screen, and we are calling this create account function here, which no longer exists in this file. So let's replace this with the sign up controller class. So sign up controller, and this should be imported from our file. And now we can access the create account. We do not need this parenthesis dot create account. Alright, and this has 3 arguments. Context is already passed, and for this email we will pass the value of text editing controller, so email.text, and same for the password as well. So now we have the UI part in our sign up screen and we have the logic part in sign up controller. Alright, so let me show you the reason for naming this controller to sign up controller. So if you have any issues with the sign up part, you can press Ctrl P and then search for sign up, and you will get the UI part and the controller part with ease. So if you have any issues with the logic part, you can navigate into the controller, and if you have issues on UI part, you can navigate into the screen. Creating separate files for logic and UI will help us fix issues and make changes to the project faster. So whenever you work on a new project, make sure you follow this folder structure. Alright, so that's it for this lesson, and in the next lesson we'll be working on login functionality. So I'll see you at the next lesson. In this lesson we'll be working with login functionality in our app. So for signing in a user with email and password, we need a form like this. So instead of creating form in our login screen, let's duplicate this sign up form because it already has all the validations and the logic is separated in the sign up controller. So let's go ahead and duplicate this sign up screen. So move into the sign up screen, copy everything, move into the login screen and replace everything of this screen. Alright, and now let's rename this sign up screen to login screen. So Ctrl D, select everything and then the login screen. Alright, and now let's change this from sign up to login. And now the login screen looks like this. Alright, so instead of create an account, let me change this to login. Alright, and when this button is clicked, this create account function is being called from the sign up controller. So let's duplicate the sign up controller for creating login controller. So let's rename this to login underscore controller. Now let's change this file name or this class name. Alright, and let's change this function name from create account to login. So now in our login screen, let's replace this with login controller. And let's import it. Login controller. and then .login. Alright, and we have everything same in the login screen and the sign up screen. So let's save it. So now let's move into this login controller again. And here, instead of create user with email and password, we need to change this to sign in with email and password. Alright. So now let me try logging in an account. At first, I'll be using invalid username and password. So if I click at this login, then I'll be getting error in my snack bar because I've entered incorrect email and password. So let me change this password and make it a valid password. Alright. So click at login. So now I am logged in and forwarded to this dashboard screen, and now the Firebase instance has a logged in user data. So now let me hot restart the app and let's see what it does. So here, even though I am logged in, I am forwarded to this login screen, and this is because in our splash screen we have hard coded this forward to the login screen, right? So instead of doing this, we will be getting the user login status and then forward conditionally. Alright. So for that, I need to access the Firebase instance. So let's import this package. Import package Firebase auth / Firebase auth dot. Alright. And now let's create a variable in this class var user equals to Firebase auth dot instance dot current user. And now if the user is not logged in, then this user variable will be null. And if the user is logged in, then we'll have some value in this user variable. Now we can use this variable for conditionally forwarding the user. So copy this variable, and here let's provide a condition. So if user equals to null, then we'll be forwarding the user to login screen, else we'll forward the user to dashboard screen. Alright, and then let's do it after 2 seconds. So now if I hot restart the app, and currently I am logged in, so I should be forwarded to this dashboard screen instead of login screen. So let's see what happens. So here is the splash screen, and after 2 seconds delay, I am forwarded to this dashboard screen because I am currently logged in. So now if I log out, then I am forwarded to this splash screen, and now this is null. So I'll be forwarded to this login screen. So currently in this login screen, we do not have any button for forwarding user to the sign up screen. So let's work on that now. So move into this login screen, and let's create another widget in this column. So it starts from here and it ends here. So this will be the place for keeping the widget. So let's create a row widget with children, and a comma is missing over here. The first child of this row will be a text widget with the text don't have an account, and another child will be the text widget with the text sign up here. So let's provide spacing between this widget by the sized box with width 20 pixel. Also let's provide spacing between the form and row widgets, so sized box with height 20 pixel. And let's provide a little bit lower spacing between this text widget, so let's change this to 10. Alright. So now let's make this sign up here bold. So style equals to text style with font weight equals to font weight dot bold. And let's change the color of this text to blue. So color equals to colors dot blue. So now let's wrap this text widget with an inkwell, and in on tap we'll be opening the sign up screen. So let's move into this splash screen and copy this code and paste it in the login screen. Alright, so over here, and let's change this to sign up screen. And we need to import it, so import it from our file, and we want back button over here, so let's use push. Alright, and let's decrease this spacing in text widget, set it to 5, and now if I click at this sign up here, I'll be forwarded to the sign up screen. Alright, so now let's try creating a new account. So the account has been created and I'm forwarded to this dashboard screen. If I hot restart the app, I'm taken to the initial splash screen, and after 2 seconds I'm forwarded to this dashboard screen. So log out, and everything is working fine. So that's it for this lesson, and in the next lesson we will be working on further improvement of this app. So I'll see you at the next lesson. In this lesson we will be working on basic decoration of this app. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to include a logo of our app over here. And for that I need to keep the image file in this assets and this images folder. And previously we used logo of the app for creating app icons. So let's get that icon from Android, app, src, main, resources, and we need a comparatively larger image. So let's navigate into this folder and use this image. So it is slightly bigger, so we'll be using this. So copy this image, Ctrl C, and then paste it in the images folder. Alright, and let's rename this to logo.png. Alright, so now we need to declare this image in our popsec.yaml. So move into this file, and you can see this assets section over here. Uncomment this, and let's replace this with assets/images, and we do not want to provide the image name, so that everything placed inside of the images will be available in our Flutter project. Alright, and as we modified this popsec.yaml, let's hard restart the app. Stop the debugging process, and now let's move into this main.dart and start debugging. So now we can use the logo image in our Flutter app. So let's move into this screen, and then login screen, and let's get this column over here, and inside of this column children, first element or the first child will be the image asset. So image.asset, and then we'll be providing the link or the location of the image. So assets/images, and then the image we want to load, so logo.png, and make sure this location is correct, otherwise our app will crash. And this image is loaded using a default size. So let's wrap this image widget with a container so that we can provide height and width. But instead of container, as we only require the height and width, we can replace this by sized box. Alright, and let the height be 100 and width be 100. And I think it's better to not use this app bar, so let's comment it. So as the app bar has been removed, this logo has moved at the top of our screen. So let's use sized box with some height, so it is in the optimal place. So now our login screen looks a lot better than it was before. So now let's work on this login button. I want this button to be a full width, so let's wrap this button with row and use expanded widget so this button has full width. So now this button is occupying full width. So the next thing that I want to do is provide a background color to this button. So let's use style argument in this elevated button. So style equals to elevated button.style from, and for the background color, let's use colors.deep purple accent. This color aligns nicely with our logo. So let's change the foreground color to colors.white. So now this elevated button looks perfect. So now I want to increase the height of this button. So let's use this minimum size argument, and it expects a size with width and height. So the first argument is the width. Let's use 0 over here so it occupies everything, and height will be 100 pixel. Right? 100 pixel seems a bit much, so let's use 50 pixel. So now it's perfect. So for improving the design of this login screen, let's remove this sized box and keep the contents of this column at center using main axis alignment.center. And now it's looking a lot better. So now let's do the same for the sign up screen as well. So the first thing I want to copy is the elevated button style. So let's copy the style of this elevated button and paste it in the elevated button of sign up screen. And I also want this button to occupy full width, so let's wrap this with this row widget and keep this elevated button wrapped by the expanded widget. So now let's bring logo in this sign up screen as well. So move into this login screen, copy the image asset and paste it in the sign up screen. So the next thing that I want to do is to remove this sign up text, but I don't want to remove the app bar because I want this back button. So I'll replace this text widget text with an empty string. And now we have this beautiful looking sign up and login screen. And now to wrap this up, I want this logo in our splash screen. So let's copy this logo from our sign up screen. So copy this sized box and move into this splash screen. So here let's replace this text widget with the logo. And now to see the result, let's hot restart the app. So here is the splash screen with the logo, and now we are forwarded to this login screen. So that's it for this lesson, and in the next lesson we'll be working on further improving this app. So I'll see you at the next lesson. In this lesson we'll be working with Firestore database in Firebase. So in our global chat app, we have this login and sign up feature. And when user account is created, an entry will be created at user section in Firebase Authentication, right? But this data only consists of some basic information like email, user ID and few other things. But we need more data related to our users like age, gender, interest, location and so on. And we won't be able to save everything in this Firebase Authentication. Alright? Firebase Authentication only provides a way to log in and sign up users. And for saving user data and other data related to our app, we need a database. And as Firebase is a full stack solution for apps, Firebase has its own database service called Firestore Database or Cloud Firestore. And we can use this database to save user data or any data related to our app. And the best part is that for working with this database, we do not need any backend or backend server. We can query this database right from our app. So let's get started by enabling Cloud Firestore or Firestore database in our Firebase project. So for that, open up your project in Firebase console, click at build and then Firestore database. And now click at create database. So the database ID is default and you can set your location anywhere. Alright, click at next. And for now we'll be starting this in production mode, so click at create. And now Firestore database has been enabled for our Firebase project. Alright, so this is the UI of Cloud Firestore, a place to see all the data of our app. So now click at rules. And now we need to make some changes so that our Flutter project can access this database. As we had started this database in production mode, read and write is false. Let's change it to true. And then publish these rules. This database is now public, and to secure it, we need to change some rules here, but we'll do that later. Alright. And now we are ready for accessing this database from our Flutter project. And for that, we need this Cloud Firestore package in our Flutter project. So click at installing and copy the installation code. Now move into VS Code. And now let's install this package. And this Cloud Firestore package needs some changes to be made in our build.gradle file. This package requires minimum STK to be 21. So press Ctrl P and then search for build.gradle. And now change this minimum STK version from 19 to 21. And now this Flutter project will support this Cloud Firestore package. So now let's launch the emulator and start debugging. You might see some red text in this debug console, but no need to worry. As long as the app is working, we do not need to worry about this red text in debug console, alright? But if build fails, then you can clean the project, run pub-get and then start debugging, alright? So now we'll be introducing some additional steps in sign up. So log out this account and move into Firebase Authentication and delete all the data from this Firebase Authentication. We are deleting these accounts so that we can create new accounts that will be linked with Cloud Firestore, alright? So in this lesson, we have enabled Firestore database in our Firebase project, and then we have cleared all the authentication data. So from the next lesson, we will be working on CRUD operations in Firestore database. So I'll see you at the next lesson. In this lesson, we will be working on assessing the Firestore database, and then we'll add a new data into it. We will learn create operation on database by creating a new user account on Firestore database, and then we'll link it to Firebase Auth. Alright. As Firebase Auth is not a suitable option for saving additional data like name, location, age and such, we will be saving this data on the database. So now I want to introduce two additional fields in this account creation, name and country. So let's move into the sign up screen, and at first let's create the text editing controller for these fields. So copy this, paste, and let's change this to name and this to country. So after the controllers are created, let's duplicate the text form fields. So let's copy this text form field, which is for the email, and use this text field right above the create account. Alright. So change this to name and this to name as well. And let's bring this sized box and keep it here. Alright. So save the code. And now we have a new field, name. Alright. So now we need to copy this again. So copy everything from here, paste it, and change this name to country and this label to country. Alright. And now seems like there is double spacing. Let's remove this sized box. And sized box is missing at the end. Let's copy this sized box and paste it over here, right above this row. So now everything seems alright. Let's change the controllers. So the controller for this field will be the country, and for this field it will be the name text editing controller. Alright. So now we need to pass the value of name and country into the sign up controller. So let's move into the sign up controller, control and click. And now let's copy this required field and duplicate it again. And let's change this password to name and this to country. So now the sign up controller will get the values and we will be using this later. Let's move into the sign up screen and pass the required arguments. So country will be the country from text editing controller.text, and name will be name.text. Alright. So now all the validations and data sending logic is working fine. So if I click at this create account, then if the data is empty, all errors are showing up. So now let me show you an issue with our app. So if I click at this text field, keyboard pops up and the app screen size is decreased, right? And this is hiding some of our widgets and we are not able to scroll. If this was a list view widget, then we would have no problem scrolling it because scrolling ability is automatically added to list view. But with other widgets, we need to define that the view is scrollable and there are components inside of it and it needs to be scrolled. And we can do this by wrapping everything with the single child scroll view. So wrap everything in this body with a widget and rename it to single child scroll view. So now save the code. And now this part of our screen is scrollable. Alright, so if you have many widgets in the screen, then to get the scrolling ability, you should be wrapping that with single child scroll view. Alright. But you cannot use this single child scroll view inside a column widget without wrapping it with the expanded widget. And this is because the single child widget will also try to occupy the infinite space of the screen. But the column will have a limited size, right? So using this single child scroll view without using expanded will give you an layout error. So let's wrap this with the expanded widget. And everything should be working fine now. So now let's move into the sign up controller and see what's happening here. So we are using this email and password for creating an account. And this create user with email and password function is creating an account in our Firebase Authentication, right? And when the account is created in Firebase Authentication, system will automatically assign a unique ID to it, right? So we'll be using that unique ID and we'll be creating a similar account in our database. And for that we need a unique ID of this user. So var user ID equals to, and the currently logged in user is inside of this Firebase auth instance. So let's use that dot current user and then dot UID, meaning the unique ID. Alright. So I'm getting an error over here because this current.uid might not exist if the user has not logged in. But as the signup will automatically log in this user, we can use this exclamation sign to instruct Dart that this variable is guaranteed not null. So now we have this user ID of a user. We can use this user ID for creating a data in our database. For that we need an access to the database. So let's import the package. So import package Cloud Firestore / Cloud Firestore.dart. And now we can use this package for accessing the database. So let me create a variable over here. So var db, meaning the database, equals to Firebase Firestore from this Cloud Firestore package. So it's right over here. Dot instance. This will get the instance of the database, alright? And now we can use this instance for adding a data into the database. So let's see how we can add a new data into the database. So db, meaning the database, dot collection. So this collection is like a table where you want to insert the data, and in our case it will be the users table. So database.collection users and then dot doc, meaning the document, and every user has its own document. So we'll be using this user ID over here. So user ID dot toString. Alright. This means that I'm trying to save a data into the users table inside of a user document, and then dot set will add the data into that document. Alright. And this data is a map. So let's create a map object string, dynamic, and the variable name will be the data equals to curly braces. Alright. And let's end this with a semicolon. And now let's construct the data to be sent into this document. So name equals to name from the function. Country equals to country from the function. And then I'll be saving this email in my Firestore as well. So email equals to email. And I also want to save the ID of this user. So ID equals to user ID. Alright. And let's use this user ID dot toString. Alright. So let's save the code. And this set function in the database will need some time to save data into the database, right? So let's use this await statement over here. And if the data is not added, this might bring some runtime error. So let's wrap this with try catch block and print error over here. Alright. So now we are ready for writing the data into the database. So let me fill up this form. So the account has been created. Let's move into this Firebase authentication and refresh this page. And I have this newly created account with ID something like AML, right? So let's move into this Firestore database. And here you can see that users collection has been created and document ID is equal to the user unique ID, right? And the data that we sent from here is set to the data of this document. So this ID that you see over here and this document ID here is the Firebase Auth user's unique ID. Alright. So now we have user account in two places. One in Firebase Auth that will only be used for login, and the main account will be at this database with all the details of the user. Alright. So Firebase Auth and Firestore database is linked to each other on this users collection by the user unique ID. So that's it for this lesson, and in the next lesson we will be working on further improving this app. So I'll see you at the next lesson.